The twin suns of Quorix hung low on the horizon, casting an amber glow over the sprawling crystalline cities of the Yethar. Once a beacon of peace and enlightenment in the galaxy, Quorix now lay in shambles. Its shimmering towers were scorched, its fertile valleys blackened by orbital bombardments, and its people huddled in subterranean shelters, their song like voices muted by despair. The Yethar were a fragile species, known not for their prowess in war but for their unparalleled ability to weave harmony into the universe. Their crystalline technology, powered by symphonic energy, was sought after by countless races, but their refusal to weaponize their gifts had left them defenseless. Now, the Krell Armada, a marauding force infamous for its brutality, had descended upon them like a swarm of locusts. The Yethar's feeble planetary defenses had crumbled in the first hours of the assault, leaving them at the mercy of their invaders. Deep beneath the surface, within the sacred chambers of the High Council, the last remnants of the Yethar leadership gathered. The chamber, once filled with melodious debates and light-filled rituals, was now a shadowy refuge. A dozen council members sat in a circle around the luminary stone, their slender, crystalline forms dimmed and cracked, a reflection of the despair etched into their very beings. In the center of the circle stood Elder Rethys, their leader, her once vibrant resonance now reduced to a faint hum. "We have but one choice left," Rethys said, her voice trembling. The words reverberated softly through the chamber, carrying with them an unspoken weight. The other council members exchanged uneasy glances, their translucent bodies shimmering faintly as they absorbed the gravity of her statement. Elder Kale, a younger and more defiant member of the council, shook his head. "The beacon is a relic of the old ones. We do not know its true purpose. To activate it is to gamble with forces beyond our comprehension." Rethys sighed, her form flickering. "And to do nothing is to ensure our extinction. The Krell will not stop until they have stripped our planet of every resource and left us to rot in the void. If the beacon offers even a sliver of hope, we must take it." "But the cost," Kale began, but Rethys silenced him with a wave of her slender hand. "The cost is irrelevant if we do not survive," she said. "The old ones entrusted us with the beacon for a reason. It was not meant to remain dormant forever." Silence fell over the chamber as the council members contemplated her words. The luminary stone in the center of the room pulsed faintly, its light reflecting their collective uncertainty. Finally, one by one, the council members nodded, their faint harmonies blending into a single, mournful chord. The decision was made. Rethys stepped forward and placed her hand on the luminary stone. Its surface rippled like liquid glass, and the chamber was suddenly filled with a low, resonant hum. The floor beneath them shifted, revealing a hidden staircase spiraling downward into the ancient depths of the planet. The council descended in silence, the air growing cooler and heavier with each step. The walls of the passage were inscribed with intricate carvings depicting the history of the Yethar and their connection to the Old Ones, a mysterious, long-extinct race whose technology and wisdom had shaped the galaxy eons ago. At the bottom of the staircase, they entered a vast cavern, its ceiling adorned with glowing stalactites that cast an ethereal light over the room. In the center of the cavern stood the beacon. It was an imposing structure, unlike anything the Yethar had ever created. Towering and angular, it seemed to pulse with an inner light that shifted and danced like a living thing. The surface was inscribed with runes in a language long forgotten, their meaning lost to time. The beacon exuded an aura of both awe and foreboding, as if it were alive and waiting. Rethys approached the beacon cautiously, her form trembling. She could feel its power resonating in her core, a deep, rhythmic thrum that seemed to synchronize with her very being. She turned to face the council, her voice steady despite her fear. "Once activated, there is no turning back," she said. "Whatever force this summons, we must be prepared to accept the consequences." The council members nodded, their harmonies rising in a solemn chorus of agreement. Rethys placed her hands on the beacon, the crystalline surface cool and smooth beneath her touch. She closed her eyes and began to sing, her voice weaving a melody that resonated with the ancient runes. The beacon responded, its light intensifying and its pulse quickening. The runes began to glow, their patterns shifting and rearranging as if coming alive. The cavern trembled, and a low rumble echoed through the depths of the planet. The beacon's light exploded outward, enveloping the chamber in a blinding brilliance. The Yethar shielded their eyes, their forms flickering in the intense glow. When the light subsided, the beacon stood silent and dark, its power seemingly spent. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, faintly at first, a distant hum filled the cavern. It grew louder and more distinct, a sound that resonated not just in the air but in the very bones of those present. It was the sound of engines colossal, powerful, and alien. Above the planet, the fabric of space began to ripple. A rift opened, and through it emerged a fleet of ships unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Massive and angular, they bristled with weaponry and radiated an aura of unstoppable force. The Deathworlder fleet had arrived, and with it came the promise of salvation or destruction. As the Yethar stood in awe and fear, they realized that their call had been answered. But what they had summoned was not a savior, it was a force that would reshape the galaxy forever. The skies of Quorix were no longer shrouded in ash and despair. Instead, they glowed with the brilliance of an unnatural storm tearing through the fabric of reality itself. The Yethar huddled in their subterranean shelters, the walls trembling as if responding to an unseen force. Their melodic whispers filled the air, fear and hope interwoven into one fragile song. For centuries, the ancient texts had spoken of the beacon's power, but they had never imagined its true purpose, or the magnitude of what it might bring. Above the planet's atmosphere, the Krell Armada halted its relentless bombardment. The invaders' ships, vast and jagged constructs of living metal, hovered ominously, their weapons aimed at the once vibrant cities they had reduced to rubble. Yet, even the Krell, a race bred for conquest, paused to assess the anomaly unfolding before them. The first rift appeared like a tear in the universe, jagged and pulsating with violent energy. Then, from its depths, emerged a colossal ship, a leviathan of human design. Its surface was black as obsidian, absorbing the faint starlight, and its silhouette bristled with weapons whose purpose was evident even to those unfamiliar with their design. The Krell's scanners struggled to analyze it, the ship's hull deflecting and absorbing every attempt to glean its weaknesses. The lead Krell warship, an intimidating behemoth in its own right, adjusted its position to face the newcomer. Inside its command deck, the Krell admiral observed the human vessel on a holographic display. The creature's mandibles clicked in a pattern that translated to a mixture of curiosity and irritation. Unknown vessel detected, a subordinate reported, its voice distorted by the guttural clicks of its species. Origin unclassified. Threat level undetermined. The admiral's claws scraped against the metallic armrest of its command throne. Fire a warning volley, it ordered, confident in the superiority of its fleet. Let them know who controls this system. As the Krell warship's energy cannons powered up, a second rift tore open. Then a third. Then a fourth. The human fleet arrived in force, each new arrival eclipsing the last in size and firepower. What had begun as a single anomaly now spiraled into a cascade of rifts, each one birthing another vessel into the void above Quorix. The Krell admiral's confidence faltered as dozens of ships emerged, their formations tightening into a flawless, intimidating array. Meanwhile, below the surface, Elder Rethys stood at the edge of the great chasm, where the beacon lay dormant once more. Her translucent form glowed faintly, her resonance trembling with a mix of exhaustion and awe. The other council members gathered around her, their harmonies subdued. "What have we summoned?" Kale asked, his crystalline features reflecting the faint light from the chasm. His earlier defiance had given way to a quiet dread. "We have summoned a force greater than we could ever comprehend," Rethys replied, her voice steady despite her fear. The Old Ones did not leave the beacon as a relic of desperation. They left it as a promise, a warning. Above, the Krell Armada launched its first volley, targeting the largest human ship in an effort to intimidate or provoke. Blinding beams of energy streaked through the void, aimed directly at the vessel's massive hull. But the human ship remained motionless, its sleek surface shimmering faintly as the energy dissolved harmlessly upon contact. For a moment, the Krell forces hesitated, their confidence eroded by the futility of their attack. Then, without warning, the human fleet responded. The lead ship, which the Krell had arrogantly targeted, unleashed a barrage of its own. A single projectile, seemingly insignificant in size, streaked toward the Krell warship that had fired the volley. The projectile struck with surgical precision, and in an instant, the Krell vessel erupted into a silent inferno. Its living metal hull disintegrated into molten fragments, scattering into the vacuum of space. Panic rippled through the Krell forces. Their invincible armada, which had crushed countless civilizations, now faced an enemy they could neither comprehend nor defeat. Orders were barked, and formations shifted as the Krell attempted to regroup. But the human fleet moved with a precision that bordered on mechanical perfection. Each ship executed its maneuvers flawlessly, closing the distance with terrifying efficiency. Within minutes, the Krell armada's ranks began to collapse. Human ships targeted their engines and weapons systems with unerring accuracy, disabling entire vessels without the need for excessive destruction. It was not a battle, it was a demonstration. As the chaos unfolded, the Yethar ventured cautiously to the surface. From their shelters, they saw the battle raging above their skies, the Krell ships scattering like leaves in a storm. For the first time in days, a flicker of hope ignited within them. They had called for salvation, and it had come though its form was unlike anything they had imagined. Rethus led a small group of council members to the surface. The devastation wrought by the Krell was evident in every direction, but their attention was fixed on the heavens. The human fleet, an overwhelming force of destruction, moved with an almost eerie grace. Each ship was a masterpiece of engineering, designed with purpose and precision. "Do you think they will speak with us?" one of the council members asked, their voice trembling. "They have answered our call," Rethus replied. "We can only hope they are as willing to listen as they are to fight." Above, the battle reached its crescendo. The last of the Krell ships attempted to flee, its engines flaring as it entered hyperspace. But before it could escape, a human vessel intercepted it, deploying a weapon that created a gravitational anomaly. The fleeing ship was pulled from its jump, its hull crumpling under the immense pressure. The message was clear: there would be no escape, no mercy. As the final Krell vessel was neutralized, the human fleet reorganized, forming a defensive perimeter around Korax. The skies, once filled with fire and destruction, now held an uneasy calm. The Yethar watched in silence, their crystalline forms reflecting the faint light of the stars. They had been saved, but the presence of their saviors raised new questions they were not yet ready to face. Within the lead human ship, a figure observed the planet below. Clad in advanced armor that shimmered like liquid metal, the commanders studied the scans of Korax's surface. Their expression was unreadable, their purpose unknown. "Begin planetary analysis," the commander ordered, their voice calm but firm. "Prepare for contact." The beacon had done its work, but its true consequences had yet to unfold. The silence following the Krell Armada's destruction was deafening, both in the heavens above Korax and in the hearts of its people. The Yethar, their crystalline forms faintly glowing under the pale light of the planet's twin suns, gathered on the surface to witness the aftermath. The Krell ships that had not been obliterated now floated as derelict hulks in orbit, their fractured hulls a grim testament to the unstoppable power of the Deathworlder fleet. Yet, as awe and gratitude began to replace their terror, a new emotion took root among the Yethar: uncertainty. Elder Rethus stood at the forefront of her council, her gaze fixed on the largest of the human ships now stationed above their planet. It was a vessel of unparalleled scale and precision, its surface a tapestry of angular designs that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The Yethar leader could feel its presence, not just through sight, but through a deep resonance that hummed in her core, a vibration that was both calming and unnerving. "We owe them our survival," said Kale, who now stood beside her, his earlier skepticism tempered by the stark reality of their predicament. "But what price will they demand for it?" Rethus did not reply immediately. Instead, she let her gaze linger on the ship, her thoughts racing. The ancient texts that spoke of the beacon had hinted at a cost, but they had offered no clarity on what that might be. As a leader, she had made a desperate choice, but the ramifications of that choice were now unraveling faster than she could grasp. Above, the human fleet moved with meticulous coordination. Smaller vessels, sleek and insect-like in design, detached from the larger ships and began scanning the planet's surface. Their movements were deliberate, their purpose unclear. Rethus felt a growing unease. The Yethar had always been a peaceful people, and the sight of these ships, bristling with unknown technologies, filled her with a sense of vulnerability she had never known. As the Yethar watched, a column of light erupted from the largest human vessel, piercing through the atmosphere and striking the surface of the planet just beyond the horizon. The ground trembled under their feet, and the Yethar murmured in alarm, their harmonies dissonant with fear. Before Rethus could speak, a message reverberated through the air, not through sound but through resonance, a deep vibration that every Yethar could feel within their cores. "This is Commander Elias Dorn of the Deathworlder fleet," the message began, its tone measured and authoritative. "We have neutralized the threat to your world. We will now initiate contact. Prepare to receive us." The Yethar Council exchanged uneasy glances. The words were direct, their meaning unmistakable. Rethus felt the weight of her decision pressing down on her more than ever. Summoning the beacon had been an act of desperation, but now they faced a new reality, one where their fate rested in the hands of a species they barely understood. Moments later, a human shuttle descended through the atmosphere, its engines emitting a low, resonant hum that mirrored the tone of the message. The sleek craft landed with precision in the ruins of what had once been Quorix's central plaza. The Yethar, led by Rethus, approached cautiously, their crystalline forms shimmering faintly in the twin sunlight. Around them, the remnants of their once thriving city stood as silent witnesses to this pivotal moment. The shuttle's doors hissed open, and a ramp extended to the ground. A single figure emerged, clad in armor that glimmered like polished obsidian. The figure was tall and imposing, their movements deliberate. As they descended the ramp, the Yethar observed them with a mixture of awe and trepidation. This was humanity, a race they had only known through fragments of history and legend. Elias Dorn, the commander of the Deathworlder fleet, removed his helmet as he reached the base of the ramp. His face was stern but not unkind, his piercing eyes scanning the gathered Yethar with an intensity that seemed to see through their very beings. Behind him, two other humans emerged, their postures alert but non-threatening. Rethus stepped forward, her translucent form glowing faintly as she inclined her head in a gesture of respect. "Commander Dorn," she said, her voice resonating with the harmonic tones of her species. "On behalf of the Yethar people, I thank you for your intervention. Without your fleet, we would not have survived." Dorn inclined his head slightly in acknowledgement. "Your gratitude is noted, Elder Rethus. But understand this: we did not answer your call out of altruism alone. The beacon you activated is a relic of immense power, one tied to an ancient pact. By summoning us, you have invoked that pact, and with it comes responsibility." Rethus felt a chill run through her form, though her crystalline body betrayed no outward sign of it. "We understand," she said carefully. "What is it you require of us?" Dorn's gaze remained steady. "Your world is now under the protection of the Deathworlder fleet. This means no harm will come to your people as long as you abide by the terms of the pact. However, this protection is not without its conditions. You will share your resources, your knowledge, and your allegiance with humanity. In return, we will ensure your survival." Kale, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward, his form glinting with defiance. "And if we refuse, what becomes of us then?" Dorn's expression did not change, but his tone hardened slightly. "Refusal is not an option. The beacon binds us both. You called and we answered. Now we are intertwined. To reject this alliance would be to undo the very salvation you sought." The tension in the plaza was palpable, the harmonies of the Yethar resonating with unease. Rethus placed a hand on Kale's shoulder, a subtle gesture of restraint. "We will honor the pact," she said, her voice firm. "But we ask for time to understand its full implications." Dorn nodded. "Time will be granted, but not indefinitely. Our presence here has already drawn attention, and there are forces in this galaxy that will seek to exploit your world's newfound significance. Prepare yourselves, Elder Rethus. This is only the beginning." As the humans returned to their shuttle, the Yethar watched in silence. The beacon had summoned salvation, but it had also brought with it a new era, one where their fate was no longer solely their own. Rethys turned to her council, her voice steady but filled with resolve. "We must adapt," she said. "Our survival depends not just on their protection, but on our ability to navigate this fragile alliance. The galaxy has changed, and so must we." Above them, the human fleet maintained its silent vigil, a constant reminder of the power they had unleashed. The Yethar had been saved from annihilation, but the cost of that salvation was only beginning to reveal itself. The days following humanity's intervention were marked by an eerie calm on Quorix. The Krell Armada had been eradicated, their twisted ships reduced to floating debris in the planet's orbit. The once constant hum of destruction had been replaced by a silence that was almost deafening. Yet beneath that silence, a storm brewed in the hearts of the Yethar. They had been saved, yes, but at what cost? Elder Rethys stood on a high ridge overlooking what had once been the grand plaza of Quorix's capital. Now, the space was dominated by human structures, modular outposts constructed with unsettling efficiency. The largest of these outposts loomed at the center, its dark, angular design stark against the soft crystalline architecture of the Yethar. Human soldiers moved purposefully among the structures, their armor glinting in the pale light of the twin suns. Drones buzzed overhead, scanning the ruined city as if cataloging every detail. Kale joined her, his form shimmering faintly as he struggled to suppress the frustration building within him. "They say they are our protectors," he began, his voice a low resonance that carried his unease. "Yet they build as if they mean to stay. Are we to be their wards forever, Rethys? Or their prisoners?" Rethys closed her eyes briefly, her form dimming. "I do not know, Kale. But we are bound to them now, whether we like it or not. The beacon has made certain of that." Below, a convoy of human vehicles rumbled through the streets, their engines emitting a low, rhythmic hum. The Yethar, who had begun cautiously venturing from their shelters, watched from a distance. Their crystalline forms shimmered faintly, their harmonies subdued. Where once they had walked their cities with pride, they now moved like ghosts, unsure of their place in a world that no longer felt like their own. Meanwhile, in the Human Command Center, Commander Elias Dorn studied a holographic display of Quorix. The planet's surface was a patchwork of devastation and beauty, its once thriving cities now little more than ruins surrounded by untouched crystalline forests. Dorn's gaze was steady, his expression unreadable as he analyzed the data. Beside him stood Lieutenant Alana Voss, her dark eyes scanning the reports streaming across her console. "They're fragile," Voss remarked, her tone clinical. "Physically, emotionally. This species isn't built for conflict. It's a wonder they survived as long as they did." Dorn nodded. Their survival wasn't due to strength but isolation. The Krell found them, and the beacon did the rest. Now they're part of something much larger than they were prepared for. Voss hesitated before speaking again. "Do you think they'll adapt, or will they break under the pressure?" Dorn's eyes flickered to the display. "That's what we're here to find out. For now, we stabilize the region, secure the planet, and assess their potential. The Council won't tolerate a weak ally." Back on the surface, Rethys and Kale were summoned to the command center for a meeting with the humans. They arrived to find the chamber bustling with activity. Holographic maps hovered in the air, displaying detailed scans of Quorix's terrain, resource deposits, and remaining infrastructure. Human officers moved between consoles, their voices low and efficient. Dorn greeted them with a curt nod. "Elder Rethys, Counselor Kale," he said, gesturing for them to sit. "Thank you for coming." Rethys inclined her head, her form glowing faintly. "We are here to listen, Commander." Dorn's gaze remained steady. "Good. Let's be clear about what happens next. Your planet is now a protectorate of the Deathworlder fleet. This means two things. First, no external force will harm you as long as we are here. Second, you will contribute to the Alliance. Your resources, your knowledge, and your cooperation are the price of your salvation." Kale bristled but remained silent. Rethys, ever composed, responded calmly. "We have no intention of breaking the pact, Commander. But understand this, the Yethar have lived in peace for centuries. We know little of war or alliances. What you ask of us will not come easily." Dorn leaned forward, his expression softening slightly. "I understand your hesitation, Elder. But this is not negotiable. The galaxy is a dangerous place, and the beacon has made your world a target. If we leave, the next fleet that arrives won't offer you terms. They'll take what they want and leave nothing behind." Rethys met his gaze, her crystalline form steady. "We will do what is necessary, but we ask for your guidance in this transition. If we are to be part of your alliance, we must learn what that means." Dorn nodded. "Then we begin immediately." Over the following weeks, the Yethar began to adapt to their new reality. Human engineers worked alongside Yethar scholars to rebuild critical infrastructure, blending human technology with the Yethar's crystalline systems. Resource surveys revealed deposits of rare minerals beneath Quorix's surface, which the humans began mining in exchange for advanced medical and agricultural technologies. But not all interactions were harmonious. The Yethar's pacifist nature clashed with humanity's militaristic efficiency. Arguments erupted between human soldiers and Yethar officials over resource allocation and cultural preservation. Kale, ever the skeptic, voiced his concerns to Rethys repeatedly. "They're dismantling our way of life," he said one evening as they walked through the ruins of the capital. "Every new structure they build, every order they give, it's another piece of our identity stripped away." Rethys sighed, her form dimming slightly. "Change is never easy, Kale. But if we resist them, we risk losing everything. We must find a way to coexist." Despite the tension, moments of understanding began to emerge. Human soldiers, initially seen as intimidating enforcers, began interacting with the Yethar on a personal level. They shared stories of Earth, of their struggles and triumphs, bridging the gap between their vastly different cultures. One day, a young Yethar child approached a human soldier stationed near the edge of the forest. The soldier, surprised but not unkind, knelt and offered the child a small holographic device. The child's crystalline form glowed brightly as they marveled at the device, their harmonic laughter echoing through the air. The moment, though small, symbolized the beginning of a fragile bond between the two species. As the days turned into weeks, Rethys found herself reflecting on the path they had chosen. The cost of their salvation was steep, but it had also brought opportunities they could never have imagined. Humanity was not just a force of destruction, they were a force of resilience and adaptability. If the Yethar could learn from them, perhaps they could find a way to thrive in this new reality. But even as hope began to take root, Rethys could not shake the feeling that the beacon's true consequences had yet to reveal themselves. The galaxy was watching, and Quorix's place in the broader tapestry of the universe was still uncertain. The skies above Quorix were deceptively peaceful, a deep expanse of black speckled with stars. But the calm was fragile, a veneer over the turmoil that simmered both on the planet's surface and in the hearts of its inhabitants. The Yethar, a people once defined by their harmony, now found themselves entangled in a web of uncertainty. The humans had brought salvation, but also irrevocable change. As days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, the full cost of their alliance began to take shape. Elder Rethys stood at the edge of a newly constructed observation platform, its sharp, angular design a testament to humanity's efficient, if unyielding, presence on Quorix. From this vantage point, she could see the remnants of her people's crystalline city merging uneasily with the stark metallic structures the humans had erected. The platform hummed faintly beneath her feet, a resonance that seemed to echo the unease she felt within her core. Behind her, Commander Elias Dorn approached silently, his polished boots striking the platform with rhythmic precision. He stopped a few paces away, giving her space but making his presence known. Rethys turned to face him, her translucent form glowing faintly in the dim light. "You've been quiet, Elder," Dorn said, his voice measured. "What weighs on your mind?" Rethys gestured to the city below. "My people. Their future. We are a species that has always thrived on harmony, on balance. But now I see only dissonance. The structures you build, the changes you bring, they clash with what we are." Dorn's expression softened, though his tone remained firm. Change is never easy, especially for a people unaccustomed to conflict. But you must understand, Elder, that the galaxy is not a harmonious place. If the Yethar are to survive, you must adapt. Rethys studied him for a moment, her luminous eyes reflecting the faint light of the platform. You speak of survival as if it is the only goal. But for my people, survival without purpose, without identity, is no survival at all. Dorn crossed his arms, his gaze unwavering. And what would you have us do? Leave? Abandon you to the next fleet that comes for your resources? You called us, Rethys. The beacon was your choice. Rethys' glow dimmed slightly, her form trembling. I know, she said quietly, and I do not regret that choice. But I fear we have lost something precious in making it. Before Dorn could respond, a commotion erupted from the city below. Alarms blared, their piercing tones cutting through the stillness of the night. Dorn instinctively reached for the communicator on his wrist, his voice sharp. Report. A crackling voice responded. Unidentified ships entering the system, Commander. Scans indicate a fleet of unknown origin. They're not broadcasting any known codes. Dorn's expression hardened, and he turned to Rethys. Stay here. I need to handle this. No, Rethys said, her voice firm. If this concerns my people, I will not stand idly by. Dorn hesitated for a moment before nodding. Then stay close. The two descended rapidly to the command center, where holographic displays lit up the room with glowing representations of the approaching fleet. The ships were sleek and predatory, their designs unlike anything the Yethar or humans had encountered before. They moved in a tight formation, their intentions unclear but unmistakably hostile. Lieutenant Alana Voss was already coordinating defenses when Dorn entered. She glanced at him, her expression grim. They're not responding to hails, and their trajectory suggests they're heading straight for Korax. We're outnumbered, but their technology appears less advanced than ours. Dorn nodded, his mind racing. Prepare the fleet for engagement. Deploy ground defenses around key infrastructure. Rethys watched the exchange in silence, her crystalline form trembling faintly. For the first time, she truly understood what it meant to be a part of a larger galaxy, one filled with threats she had never imagined. She turned to Dorn, her voice steady despite the fear in her resonance. If this is the price of survival, then I will stand with my people. The battle began as the unknown fleet entered the atmosphere. The human ships engaged with precision, their weapons tearing through the enemy formations. On the ground, Yethar and human forces worked together to defend the city. The Yethar, though inexperienced in combat, used their crystalline technology to create barriers and disrupt the enemy's communication systems. For the first time, they fought not as separate species, but as allies. Amid the chaos, Rethys found herself on the front lines, her form glowing brightly as she directed her people. Kale stood beside her, his earlier defiance replaced by determination. We may not be warriors, he said, his voice resonating with resolve, but we will not let them take what is ours. As the battle raged on, the tide began to turn. The human fleet's superior technology and tactics overwhelmed the enemy, and the Yethar's contributions proved invaluable in holding the ground. After hours of relentless fighting, the last of the enemy ships retreated, their broken fleet vanishing into the void. In the aftermath, the city was silent once more. Fires burned in the distance, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of destruction. But amidst the ruins, there was a sense of unity that had not existed before. Yethar and human soldiers worked side by side to tend to the wounded and rebuild what had been lost. Rethys stood in the plaza, her form dim but steady. Dorn approached, his armor scuffed and his expression weary. We did it, he said simply. Rethys nodded. Yes, but not as saviors and wards, as allies. Dorn's gaze softened, and for the first time he allowed a small smile. Perhaps there's hope for us yet. The following days were a flurry of activity. The Yethar began integrating human defensive strategies into their own systems, while humanity learned to appreciate the Yethar's unique strengths. What had begun as a relationship of necessity was evolving into something more, a partnership built on mutual respect and understanding. As Rethys looked to the skies, she felt a glimmer of hope. The galaxy was vast and filled with dangers, but it was also filled with potential. The Yethar had not lost their identity, they had found a new one, forged in the fires of adversity. They were no longer just a peaceful, isolated people. They were survivors, protectors, and now partners in an alliance that could shape the future of the galaxy. And as the stars shimmered above, Ruthus knew that whatever came next, they would face it together.